Oh, flying upside down make you a little queasy, doesn't it, boy? Well, no, not a...
The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was not just a hit American sitcom from the 90s. It was the first breakout show with a rapper in the lead. A kid from West Philadelphia gets sent off to live with a wealthy family in Bel-Air, and out of that collision between two worlds, the laughs, the trouble, and a whole piece of pop culture memory start coming to life. But hold on, that is only the paint on the surface. People usually remember the bright milestones, but the real treasure in this show is buried in the strange things ordinary viewers never got to see. The real reason Will took the role. A behind-the-scenes relationship that stayed tense for years. A legendary opening song that almost went in a completely different direction. Today we are digging up the 20 strangest truths behind the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And trust me, the deeper you dig, the more you realize old shows are not just nostalgia. They are treasure. Number 20. NBC. Took a wild chance on a rapper in tax trouble and created a legend. If you want to know the strangest thing about the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, this is it. In 1990, NBC, a primetime television machine known for playing it safe, handed an entire family sitcom to a young rapper buried in trouble with the IRS. Honestly, if somebody had brought that idea into a television meeting room back then, I think half the room would have assumed it was a joke that had gone a little too far. But that is almost exactly how this legend began. The tax mess was the very thing that pushed him toward Fresh Prince, with a debt of $2.8 million and 70% of his income from those early seasons being taken. But the part that still makes me laugh when I look back is not just the money. What is really strange is that NBC was still willing to bet on a face coming out of hip-hop at a time when network television still looked at rap with real suspicion. Andy Borowitz later remembered that NBC itself was deeply nervous about a rapper leading a network sitcom, and yet that very gamble that sounded completely wrong exploded into one of the most beloved series of an entire generation. In other words, Fresh Prince was not born out of certainty. It was born out of pressure, out of anxiety, and out of a decision that could very easily have failed. And if you think the tax trouble is strange enough, just wait until you hear what happened once he actually had to act in front of the camera. Number 19. Will Smith mouthed other people's lines and drove the set crazy. I recently went back and watched some of the early episodes of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and I noticed something pretty fascinating. Will Smith was mouthing the other actors' lines right along with them. Not in his head, right there on his face. And the reason is easy enough to understand. At that point, Will was still brand new to sitcom acting, so he memorized almost the entire script, not just his own lines. It helped him feel less afraid of forgetting dialogue, less afraid of freezing up, less afraid of throwing off the rhythm of a scene in front of a live audience. The problem was that his mouth would sometimes follow along with every single line his scene partner was about to say. It sounds funny now, but standing on that set, I doubt it felt so charming. Karyn Parsons clearly remembered Will mouthing lines right in front of her, and Tatyana Ali said he did the same thing with her. Just picture it. You are trying to keep your timing clean, and the person standing in front of you is silently shaping every word you are about to say. Just thinking about it is enough to make you irritated. What makes this detail so memorable is that it pulls Will Smith down from the level of screen icon and brings him back to exactly what he was then, a young actor under pressure, clinging to every line so he would not slip off the rails. And that is still not the strangest truth today. Let me tell you the secret in number 18, the kind of thing no viewer could ever know just from watching the show. Number 18. Some seasons of Fresh Prince were written like farewells. Back when I used to watch The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air on television, I never once thought of it as a show living on the edge. But behind the screen, it was a very different story. There were seasons when the team had to write the ending, as if they were preparing to say goodbye, because nobody could be sure the series would be coming back. I have always thought that feels a lot like real life. You still go to work every morning, you still walk into the office, still sit through meetings, still laugh with your coworkers, like normal. But somewhere in your gut, you know things are not stable at all. Nobody says it outright, but everybody knows the foundation is shaking. Fresh Prince had seasons like that. The endings of seasons 3, 4, and 5 were all prepared like doors that might close if NBC decided the game was over. Viewers at home had no way of knowing that. All they saw was a sitcom moving along just fine. The people inside it had to keep smiling, keep the rhythm going, keep the warmth of a television family alive, while they themselves did not even know how much longer that family would still be there. Number 17. The Jazz Toss. Out the door was more complicated than you think. If you grew up with the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, I would bet you remember Jazz getting thrown out of the Banks house more clearly than a whole lot of the actual dialogue. It looks simple enough. One quick toss out the door, the audience roars, and that is the joke. But sitcoms from that period had a stubborn kind of cleverness I have always loved. They knew when a gag still had value, and they would ride it all the way. That famous jazz toss was basically not a brand new shot every time. According to a lot of retrospective pieces, the team mostly relied on the same exterior toss and kept reusing it over the years. That is why Jazz often had to wear the same familiar shirt so everything would match. It sounds like a tiny detail, but that shirt was the key to keeping the joke alive without the audience realizing they were being played a little. The funniest part is that even the behind-the-scenes story of that toss got told like a legend. One place says they shot it about 40 times. Another remembers it as 150 tosses in a single day. At a certain point, the exact number almost stops mattering. What matters is that they turned a budget-saving trick into a running gag that still makes people laugh when you bring it up now. Number 16. Aunt Viv disappeared in the middle of the show. Fresh Prince did something very strange. It replaced the mother figure in the middle of the run, then kept walking forward as if nothing all that major had happened. You only need a few episodes to feel it. Janet Hubert was Aunt Viv in the first 3 seasons, and she had a presence that was impossible to mistake sharp, strong, and carrying real weight in the Banks house. Then, season 4 comes along, and Daphne Maxwell Reid steps in. The show keeps the same living room, the same staircase, the same household rhythm, but the familiar feeling is no longer exactly the same. In a family sitcom, that is not just swapping out a side character. That is replacing one of the actual heartbeats of the house. What viewers sitting in front of the television did not fully see at the time was that the change was not smooth behind the scenes at all. There was tension, disagreement, contract trouble, and words exchanged that kept echoing long after Janet Hubert left the show. That is why every time I look back at the Aunt Viv situation, it does not feel like an ordinary recast to me. It feels like a crack the show had to throw a rug over and then keep living with. The hard part is that Fresh Prince was good enough to keep you watching, keep you laughing. It is just that from that point on, the Banks house was never entirely the same house again. And somehow, inside a show that carried a crack like that, there was another connection strong enough to change the direction of the whole series. Number 15. Will and Carlton changed the direction of the entire series. At first, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air seemed like it wanted to live on a very familiar sitcom engine. Will is the troublemaker. Uncle Phil is the serious one. A kid from West Philadelphia walks into a house built on rules, then collides with the most powerful man in it. That makes sense. The only thing is the show quickly ran into a different truth, one that was a lot more fun. The second Will stood next to Carlton, the rhythm of the whole show changed. Honestly, that is what made me fall for this show. Not because Uncle Phil became any less important, not at all. It is just that Will and Carlton had this quality where the minute they were together, everything caught fire. One of them is loose, fast, messy, always ready to stir up the room. And their friendship is what made the series feel truly different. I have always liked shows that are smart enough to recognize what the audience is loving most. Fresh Prince did exactly that. It did not keep clinging to the original direction just because someone had mapped it out first. It turned toward the thing with more life in it, and honestly, I am glad it did. That is how someone who could have stayed just an annoying cousin ended up becoming a character audiences remembered for decades. Number 14. The legendary Carlton dance was created by Alfonso Ribeiro himself. Some things in television can have a whole writer's room behind them, a whole crew, a whole season of work, and still not last as long as one moment. That seems like it should not matter all that much. Carlton's dance is one of those things. The move the whole country can recognize from one shoulder tilt, one sharp arm motion, and one overly serious face, while the body is doing something completely ridiculous, started out as almost nothing in the script. Basically, just this Carlton dances. That was it. Everything after that came from Alfonso Ribeiro. And that is exactly why I love this story. Nobody handed him a legendary dance. There was no instruction sheet telling him how exaggerated Carlton should be, how stiff, or how funny. Alfonso had to invent the whole thing himself, and he pulled it from two inspirations that sound mismatched. The second you hear them, the slightly goofy kind of dancing Eddie Murphy once used for laughs, mixed with the eager and awkward energy of Courtney Cox in Dancing in the Dark. On paper, that sounds hard to believe. Put it on Carlton, and suddenly it feels so right, you cannot imagine anyone else doing it and making it their own. Some people enter audience memory through one explosive moment like that, and some leave a mark in a much quieter way just by growing up year after year right in front of you. Number 13. Viewers watched Ashley grow up, but Tatyana Ali was growing up. 2. Watching The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Now there is something very sweet about it that not many people thought about at the beginning. You are not just watching Ashley grow up. You are also watching Tatyana Ali grow up right there on screen. She came into the show as a very little girl, and with each passing season that feeling becomes more obvious. This is no longer just a character moving from childhood to adolescence, because the script says so. It feels like you are watching a real little girl move through her own early years inside the Banks house under studio lights, and then gradually become a young woman in front of the whole country. Maybe that is why this detail always feels both warm and a little awkward to me. Tatyana Ali's first kiss happened right there on the show. Think about that. It is sweet and embarrassing in exactly that old sitcom way. A girl who is still growing up standing there between camera's lights and an audience and hitting one of those private milestones of adolescence while the whole production is watching. Will Alfonso and Karyn even teased her before the scene, the kind of teasing that only happens in places where people have been around each other long enough to feel like family. Number 12. Before they rolled. Camera. Will's dressing room turned into a dance floor. People tend to picture a sitcom set as a place where everybody is holding scripts, walking around fixing hair, fixing clothes, and winding themselves tight, waiting to be called onto the set. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air had a completely different kind of warm-up. Before taping, cast and crew would often pile into Will Smith's dressing room, turn the music on, and dance like they were heading to a party instead of going to work. That is the spirit of Fresh Prince right there. This show never had the dry energy of a team just standing on their marks and reading their lines. It always felt like these people genuinely liked being around each other, liked clowning around, liked warming up the room before they walked out, and warmed up the audience too. The audience may never have known what they were doing in that dressing room before the cameras rolled, and that is exactly what makes it so fun. Number 11. Fresh Prince was surprisingly popular. Among prisoners at Guantanamo Bay. If I asked you to guess one of the strangest audience groups that connected with the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, I do not think you would land on the right answer, even if you sat with it all afternoon. Not students, not nostalgic sitcom fans, not even the people who grew up with Will Smith in the early 90s. One of the most frequently mentioned groups was actually prisoners at Guantanamo Bay. In 2012, ABC News cited information from the detention camp library showing that demand for Fresh Prince had grown so much they had to bring in more copies. Several reports at the time even described it as a particularly popular form of entertainment among detainees at one point, surpassing Harry Potter in popularity. No matter how I think about it, that detail still feels almost surreal. A bright, colorful sitcom with a rap intro, a glowing Banks mansion, dancing laughter, and very American family stories being embraced in such a specific way by an audience like that. The strange part of this fact is not where the show was played, it is who was watching it. That is what makes Fresh Prince feel like a cultural phenomenon that is hard to predict. Some shows become famous because everybody watches them. This one went a step further. It reached people you would never even think about. Number 10. Aunt Viv left the show. But the tension never really did. Janet Hubert left the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air after season 3. And for years after that, every time the story came up, people seemed to hear a different version of what happened. She openly criticized Will Smith, spoke about how she felt she was treated, and described the atmosphere on set when things started to fall apart. On the other side, Alfonso Ribeiro pushed back strongly and rejected many of the claims she made. Tatyana Ali took a more careful position. She never described Will Smith the way Janet Hubert had. That is exactly why this story has lingered for so many years. It is not the kind of behind-the-scenes situation where you hear one side and feel like you understand everything. It feels more like a door left half open. Everybody can see something happened, but nobody outside the people involved really knows the full picture. That is why whenever I hear someone speak with total certainty about who was right and who was wrong, I get a little skeptical. Old sets, especially ones filled with strong personalities, rarely leave behind clean and simple stories. Number 9. The Banks house was not really in Bel-Air. You look at that house for years, hear the opening theme, and that familiar exterior just appears in your mind, so it feels like you know it well. The truth is, the Banks house was not actually in Bel-Air. The exterior used in the opening was located in Brentwood, and the part viewers remember even more clearly, the living room, the staircase, the entire interior atmosphere. None of that existed inside that real house. It was all built and filmed on a set. You think you are remembering a real place, but what you are actually remembering is a television illusion put together so smoothly it never breaks. One well-chosen exterior, one convincing set, a few familiar angles, and suddenly, a whole generation believes they have stepped inside that house. Fresh Prince did that so well that many people who grew up with the show still think the real house and the on-screen house are the same. That was the craft of American sitcoms back then. Number 8. Many of the adults in the Banks family were younger than you think. You watch The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and completely believe in that family structure. A mother is a mother. An aunt is an aunt. Children are children. The truth is, the age gaps in real life were not nearly as wide as they feel on screen. Janet Hubert, the original Aunt Viv, was only 12 years older than Will Smith. And if you place her next to Karyn Parsons, who played Hillary, the gap is only about 10 years. So the woman audiences accepted as the mother figure of that entire household was not separated by generations the way it seems. There is another detail that often gets misremembered. Vernee Watson Johnson, who played Will's mother, is often said to be about 14 years older than him. But based on their publicly known birth years, she was born in 1949 and Will in 1968. which makes a 19-year difference. Even so, 19 years to play the mother of a man already in his 20s on screen is still a relatively tight gap by television standards. That was the skill of sitcom casting back then. With the right presence and the right energy, audiences believed the relationship instantly. Number 7. Daphne Maxwell Reid skipped the original audition because she heard the show starred a rapper. Back when the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was still in its early stages, Daphne Maxwell Reid passed on auditioning for Aunt Viv simply because she heard the series was centered around a rapper. It makes sense. In the early 90s, the idea of a network sitcom built around a young rapper still felt unusual enough to make industry professionals hesitate. The interesting part is how life tends to circle back. The person who was not particularly interested at the beginning later became the Aunt Viv of the second half of the show. That alone tells you how strange of a gamble Fresh Prince really was. Not just the network wondering if it would work, but even people in the industry not fully seeing what it could become. Number 6. Will's mom in the opening was not the same actress in the show. Let me test you for a second. Next time you watch the opening of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, take a close look at the mother who sends Will off. Then think about the mother who appears later in the actual series. Do they match perfectly in your memory? They do not. The woman in the opening is not the same actress who plays Vi in the show, and the beauty of it is how smoothly the opening works. Viewers absorb that image without ever stopping to question it. That is one of those small tricks old sitcoms pulled off so well. It is not important enough to disrupt the story, but it quietly reminds you that memory can be more confident than it should be. Number 5. Only 4 actors appeared in every episode of Fresh Prince. Let me throw you a question that sounds easy but really is not. If you had to name 4 people who appeared in every single episode of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air from start to finish, who would you say? Most people will immediately say Will Smith. That one is obvious. The second is usually Carlton. Still fine. By the third name, people start to hesitate. Some think of Aunt Viv, then remember the recast. Others guess Ashley, and then pause. The real answer is only 4 names: Will Smith, Alfonso Ribeiro, Karyn Parsons, and James Avery. It sounds obvious once you hear it, but not everyone gets all 4 before the reveal. That is what makes this fact interesting. Fresh Prince had a large cast with many strong personalities, enough to make you feel like several of them were there the entire time. But when you really count it out, only 4 stayed from beginning to end. Number 4. Many lines were adjusted by the cast to better reflect Black culture. A lot of people assume network sitcoms work like this. Writers write, actors say exactly what is on the page. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air did not operate that way. Monday was table read. Tuesday and Wednesday, the cast would run scenes for the writers and give direct feedback on what felt right, what did not, what sounded authentic to a Black family, and what felt like someone trying too hard to sound authentic. According to behind-the-scenes accounts, this was also when the cast would offer cultural input to a writer's room that was largely white, and the script would continue evolving from those sessions. And once a show is that careful with its dialogue, it is almost inevitable that even the opening would come together in a very particular way. Which brings us to number 3, the story behind one of the most famous theme songs ever. Number 3. The famous opening rap was basically saved by Will and Jazzy Jeff. There are theme songs you do not need to hear all the way through. Just a few beats, and the entire show comes rushing back. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is exactly that. To me, it is not just an opening. It is almost a doorway into the entire world of the show. You hear that rap and immediately know where Will came from, why he was sent to Bel-Air, and how that clash of worlds begins. The creative team even treated the opening as part of the show's storytelling, not just decoration. Quincy Jones originally brought in a different theme. Will Smith was not satisfied with it. So he and DJ Jazzy Jeff sat down, reshaped it into something more narrative, more true to Will's voice, and created the version an entire generation would later memorize. According to accounts from Jeff and Andy Borowitz, the lyrics and overall direction came together so quickly that the story now feels more like a spark of lightning than a long production process. Number 2. Will Smith. Almost Was Not Fresh, Prince Kid and Play were the first choice. You look at a show that has become iconic at a role now almost inseparable from Will Smith, and it is easy to forget that before everything locked into place, history could have gone a very different way. There is a behind-the-scenes story suggesting the project was originally imagined for Kid and Play. That alone is unusual, but it gets even stranger. At the same time, House Party, which people automatically associate with Kid and Play, was once being developed for DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Two paths crossing in a way that almost reshuffled a whole corner of early 90s pop culture. And that was not even the final turn, because the strangest thing about Fresh Prince is not who almost starred in it. It is how the audience itself helped keep it alive. Number 1. What saved Fresh Prince? Were the old episodes. Not every sitcom can pull this off. Television usually survives on what comes next. The next episode has to bring people back. Ratings have to hold. The network has to stay confident. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air had moments where new episodes were not giving NBC that confidence anymore. Normally, that is when you start to hear the door closing. But something rare happened. Local stations looked at the reruns and realized audiences kept coming back to them steadily, as if they never got tired of the Banks house. Looking back at all 20 of these stories, I am more convinced than ever that The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was not just a successful sitcom. It feels more like a happy accident of American television. A risky idea an inexperienced rapper near misses that could have taken it in a different direction, behind-the-scenes fractures, and spontaneous moments that outlived the script itself. All of those things could have pulled the show apart. But somehow, that chaos is exactly where Fresh Prince found its soul. And if you enjoy digging into the hidden layers of classic shows like this, go ahead and subscribe and stick around. There are still plenty of familiar titles ahead, and the stories behind them are not always what you think.